Paul addressing a number of issues that at the time were a problem for the church in defining who is a member of the church. Hence, you have a lot of people coming into the church, and Paul knocking down a lot of things, knocking down circumcision, saying, nope, Jewish thing, non-Jews, not necessary. Basically, that helps you understand why some submerge and some sprinkle the head. It was simply to cover nobles who could not be held by mere commoners and be subjected underwater. It is always something God gives is subject to obedience. When the mission is not fulfilled, he takes it to somebody else. It doesn't mean you don't go to heaven. It means you just lose the privilege of hosting the message in that particular period. So Adventism cannot call itself the remnant simply by a tag. Here, the definition of the church obviously has changed, because here, the church is no longer held theologically or held administratively through the Roman influence. The church is now a denomination, an organization. And here, the introduction of membership comes in. There is now a formulation of a test. How do we know you truly believe in what we believe in? Enter the baptismal vow. While everyone is in agreement about the second coming, they are also in agreement about dying and going to heaven, which leaves them confused. Is he coming to take, or are we going? If we are going, why is he coming? If he is coming, why are we going? So they have not resolved, because the Seventh-day Adventist Church among Christians is the only one that connects spiritual well-being with physical well-being. The only other religion like us is Buddhism. We are trying to deal with the history of the church here so that we understand where we fit when we get baptized and where we fit when we are becoming its members. What are these things and what are they trying to address? The Seventh-day Adventist Church has never said, don't eat meat. Yet you speak about it that way. We have only cautioned that meat brings a lot of diseases. We have never developed a doctrine on meat. The question you have asked me to address on baptism in the church is coming only as a product of generational changes. So what the church has for many years been ignorant to is that changes in generations also affect the definition of the church and the way it upholds itself. There are some whispers coming of that nature. No, baptize me, let me go. Are we still together? And both sides, of course, the second side says, no. Baptism is not just entry into Christ. Baptism is entry into the body of Christ. The church is a necessary instrument of the workings of God in sustaining the spirituality of believers. That's the one argument. The other argument says, no, Christ himself would convert people and urge them, leave me. And so the question is not whether membership and baptism should go together, but whether the format under which they are hosted right now is beginning to make them incompatible. To discuss baptism and church membership, to see, the topic was written in quite a youthful manner because it concludes with the why. And I thought maybe the person wanted to say for the why, but that is the topic for this evening. I must confess it is a complex topic which I will not be able to do justice to in one night. There are quite a lot of components that come into issues of baptism and the membership. There are historical, ecclesiastical, theological issues that affect this topic. And for one to be able to thoroughly go through the relationship between these two, one might need more time perhaps than the evening would allow. But I will try and pull all the key elements of the feeding streams in the lake that we are trying to fill up. But before I do that, may I ask for smaller parts of two songs which are going to relate to the topic. I would like us to sing hymn number 348, only the first and the last stanza. 348 in the Seventh-day Adventist hymnal, just the first and the last stanza. The title is "The Church Has One Foundation." The first thing that we have to agree to is that obviously when we are talking about this topic of baptism and when we are talking about this topic of the church, is that these are two existing biblically founded institutions. They are not necessarily concepts of the Christian faith, but they are derived theologically and biblically from the scriptures themselves. The church exists in the Bible as well as baptism as well. Are we still together? So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to just do a history of the church, which will help bring into context baptism and membership. Are we still together? All right. So let's just look at this topic under this subtopic, the church in the 21st century with an unchanging God in a changing church. All right. And now we are going to do a bit of participation. There's a picture there. Just tell me what it makes you feel, not think, feel. Okay? You look at a picture like that, what goes through you? Okay? White people, quite, yes, quite close, yes. What else do you think? For those of us who have studied in Adventist institutions, there's a Helderbergish, college-ish thing, Solusish thing going on there, okay? It has this sort of nostalgic feeling of some tranquil place set aside somewhere with some streams that would be flowing somewhere there, some lofty fields and beautiful flowers, and there's a nice, beautiful, small community church there, which would give you a nice picture of a nice community of people who come to this nice, beautiful, small church. Probably the local carpenter is also the local pastor. You can picture after Sunday school or Sabbath school, children running around, just playing there, and then the ladies with the picnic baskets and the men seated there discussing issues. And what that really captures for you is the church in the 1700s, 1600s, 1700s, 1800s. This is how our churches were designed. In fact, the model of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in choosing educational institutions still favors that kind of an approach. We are still very much anti-modern urban structures. We still prefer farms. We can build modern buildings, but we still prefer farms far away from everyone else. The word church is a word that we use almost every day. All of us, we speak about the church, but hardly, I think, do we ever pause to think, what do we actually mean when we say church? What is the meaning of this word in its reality, okay? And then the word church comes from two texts or words in the Bible that will appear both in the Old and in the New Testament in different contexts. The first one is the Old Testament, which uses the word ecclesia, all right, from which comes the English word eclectic, okay? When you are making an eclectic piece, putting together many different things to make something complete. Are we still together? So ecclesia, a combination of many components to form a whole, right? That would be the Old Testament word used for the church. And we also find this one, laos, from which comes the word layman, okay? And simply put, everyone is a layman to somebody, okay? As a theologian, among you, you become layman to me. When I'm with my doctor, I am a layman to her. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? And when you are sitting with your accountant, you are the layman to him or her. Okay? So layman doesn't apply to church members. Layman applies to whenever someone has authority in a field which you do not have. You are a layman to that person, okay? Which is why the church must just learn this whole humility thing. I've never understood why a conference health director is a pastor. Thinking to myself, no, you're not a health professional. You and I are theologians, but there you are running health for the whole conference, which never really makes sense. I wish the church would just accept that everyone is called into their different professions. When the church needs a treasurer, hire a CFO who is a CA. When the church needs a health ministries director, how about we hire a medical doctor? When the church needs a secretary, how about somebody with law? You know, but so far all of these positions are ours. I will call for change after my election. I'm joking. So, but Laos really means a congregation. But more precisely, this is very important. The word Laos doesn't come from a positive background. It comes from politics. It means a mob. Okay? A mob. So in the New Testament, Christianity wasn't seen as a religion initially. They were seen as a religious as a political movement. So in their gatherings, they were called a Laos, a mob. And that stuck with us through and through. Are we still together? But that is usually the original foundations. And now the church evolved, obviously, and this is what we are going to go through. We're going to go through the evolution of the church and see what happens. Firstly, Paul in Romans chapter 12, 13, and 14 presents an interesting definition of the church in those 3 chapters. And there you find him arguing certain things. To another, it is good to eat this, and to another, it is not good to eat this. Whether you eat or you don't eat, you do this for the glory of the Lord. To another, it is good to honor this day. To another, it is good to honor that day. Whether you honor this day or you honor that day, we do it for the honor of who? Of the Lord. Whether we live or we die, we do it for the honor of the Lord. To the one who prefers vegetables, let him eat vegetables, for so is his faith sustained. But to the one who can eat meat, let him eat meat, for this is the way his faith is sustained. For I tell you the truth, a little wine a day will not cause any harm, except as it shall settle the stomach. This is Paul addressing a number of issues that at the time were a problem for the church in defining who is a member of the church. Are we still together? And so in the first century church, the definition of what was the church was purely theological. Paul defines the church as those who believe in the birth, the life, the resurrection, the death and the resurrection, the power of the Spirit in transformation, and the second coming of Jesus Christ. So he says, if you have understanding of these, you are a member of the church. I shall not hold you accountable on all these other issues. Are we still together? And so you come across a theological definition of the church in the first century, truly and purely rooted on Christological issues. Who is Jesus to you? Do you understand who he is? And bear in mind, Paul is then not saying everything he discusses is permissible. He is simply arguing when Christ is firmly rooted, he will root out the rest. For now, the church will be defined through Jesus and having faith in him. Are we still together? And of course, that shapes the church in the first century. Hence, you have a lot of people coming into the church, and Paul knocking down a lot of things, knocking down circumcision, saying, nope, Jewish thing, non-Jews, not necessary. He's trying to unify the church under one umbrella that defines what it means to be the church. Are we still together? And he's trying to kick out things. He says, the Spirit says these things are peripheral. They should not define the church. What should define the church is this faith we have in Jesus Christ and our willingness to cooperate with the Holy Spirit as he is using us, okay? Now, as this then grows, the church then begins to do something it never had before. It takes on an administrative shape, which is the next level that Paul has to address. Now the church starts by gathering in homes, firstly. People are gathering in homes because, remember, they are not accepted in the synagogues. Jews don't want them there. They used to want them. Then the Jews changed their mind. They're like, nah, you are not a religion that is similar to ours. Walk away. And so they find themselves needing to gather up in their homes. That's where they do their worship. And of course, up comes this term now, Christians, which again, in its origins, is not positive. The term Christians initially mocks those who believe in a man who died and pretended like he resurrected. Are we still together? So it wasn't used positively. To call yourself a Christian was to mean you are that idiot who believes a man can resurrect. And so they get given the tag that they are Christians. And so Paul then adds this layer where now the ecclesia begins to have bishops or elders, deacons, and many ministries are born. Now, the church is not just becoming a theological institution now, it is becoming an institution with administrative responsibilities, spiritual gifts, and facets of worship. Are we still together? Right. Hence, Paul now articulates those issues to say the Spirit says, let there be elders, let there be this, let there be that, let there be that, and this is how they are going to be doing their things. And of course, even the offices we have today, like a pastor, all of them born out of that Pauline work in terms of giving the church some administrative works. Now, round about the 300s to the 400s AD, then again the church as a definition begins to change. Because the Roman Empire is still the dominant empire in the world at that particular point in time, there are some changes that the empire was undergoing which were going to impact the definition of the word church. Up to this time, the Roman Empire is quite happy seeing the church as just another overzealous institution. It all falls apart because up to this time, all Roman emperors have been persecuting Christians as an overzealous group that destabilizes the empire. What changes everything is when the Queen Mother, the mother of Constantine the Great, the emperor, accepts Christianity. This pushes Constantine to change the policy of the Roman Empire towards Christianity. I mean, he's not going to assassinate his own mother. Well, he could, but he chose not to. Are still together? And so because of the position his mother has put him in, he now has to say, all right, this religion is becoming big. The more we kill them, the more they increase. That's the first problem. Secondly, the inja isizalele endlini. How do you say inja isizalele endlini in English? Yes. The dog has given birth in the house, which means the funk has hit the fan. His mother has become the thing that they have been persecuting. Are still together? And that changes the scope, because from there onwards, now here is where we do not know whether it is true or not. Constantine is on his way, coming from the west towards the east to fight the Byzantine Empire, when he says while he was on his way, a light shone in the sky with the sign which is an X with a P inside. If you look at it in the English, it's an X with a P. But in the Greek, it's actually the high and the rho, which is Christus, the Greek for Christ. So he says, I see this emblem in the sky, and I hear a voice like St. Paul. I hear a voice that says, only in my name will you conquer. And from there, Constantine converts. He becomes a Christian. And this is where the change comes, because now there's a merger between the Republic of Rome and the church to form what is called the Holy Roman Empire, because it is now a combination of two things. The church is the right arm of the state, and of course the state is its own left arm, and so you have this combination that is there. Now, why this becomes important? Because this is where baptism gets its first twerking. When Constantine is going to be baptized, he rejects the notion of a pure Roman of noble and royal birth being submerged underwater by commoners who are priests. To him, such is not acceptable. Are we still together? And let me tell you where the significance is. as he has been rolling in Christianity into the church, he has introduced the governance structures of the Roman Empire into the church. He has introduced the efficiency, the military precision of the empire into the church. Some of the things that are now in the church that were never there before, those elders and bishops that were there 300 years ago that were set up by Paul, they have now been put into classes of leadership. They are now an elder in the local church, and a group of elders in a particular region will be led by a bishop, and a group of bishops in a province will be led by an archbishop, and a group of archbishops in a country will be led by a cardinal, and a group of cardinals in countries will be led by the father of the church, Papa in Latin, or Pope as you commonly use it. And so in him introducing all of these, he has also introduced salary scales. Okay? What he has introduced is that now bishops, pastors get salaries. Not only do they get salaries, they are exempt from tax. The exemption of the church from tax is not a modern thing. It was introduced by Constantine the Great to say whatever the church owns is exempt from tax. But here's the powerful thing. If you are a bishop of a province, when the Roman government collects tax in that province, it tithes directly to the bishop. So if I am the Archbishop of Gauteng, when SARS has collected tax in all of Gauteng, 10% comes to me directly. Was I not called in the wrong era? And so what that created is a challenge, because the church became so rich. But what it didn't notice is, when there was time now for Constantine to be baptized, he argues, I am of noble blood. I am an emperor. I will not be submerged by commoners underwater. It was very difficult for the church then to say to him, this is what the Bible says. The church is rich through him. He who pays the piper plays the tune. If I'm going to pay you, you play my tune. And so he simply said to the church, find a way. Find a way for me to be baptized respectably. They then headed to Romans 12. Do not be conformed to the standards of this world, but be ye transformed by the renewal of your. And so the theological point was set that transformation happens in the, redemption happens in the, if you baptize the head, you have covered redemption. All right? And so the nobles can now get baptized without submersion. Basically, that helps you understand why some submerge and some sprinkle the head. It was simply to cover nobles who could not be held by mere commoners and be subjected underwater. Are we still together? Yes. And what you are seeing now is you've seen three changes if you're paying attention. We've moved from a theological church to a church that has administrative duties to a church that is as large as an empire. Okay? And it functions now with military precision, with incomes. It has palaces, it has lands, it has farms. Because remember, people are donating to the church. Nobles donate to the church. And so the church is accumulating assets. Bishops are becoming more powerful and bigger in the process. Okay? Yet we have to understand that while all of this is happening, there are some theological churches you need to understand that are found in the Bible, okay? For example, when you read the Bible, you are going to come across something that we in theology call an eschatological church. The eschatological church, literally coming from the Greek eschatos, which means last thing, eschatology, okay? So the church of the last days, this is the church that will be literally alive when Jesus comes. It's usually called the eschatological church. Then you have the church militant. What is the church militant? The church militant is you and I today, the church that is still at war with sin, called the church militant. Then you've got the church triumphant. Now, this is interesting. The church triumphant is us in heaven plus the worlds that never fell into sin. Okay? It is, that combination is usually called the church triumphant. This should affect you. Then there is something called the remnant church. The remnant church has three categories. Number one, there is something that, let me start from the middle. There is a historical remnant. These are the Israelites by blood, which you are not and I am not. They are the historical remnant, the descendants of Abraham, the guys who literally live in Israel today and who run Sentin. Those guys. The guys who run banking all over the world. Those guys. The Steven Spielbergs. Those are the guys. They are the historical remnant, the direct blood, gene for gene descendants of Abraham. We are not. You then have the faith remnant, which is all Christianity. In the religions that are in the world, Christianity, Buddhism, Islam, Hinduism, Kabbalism, African traditional religions, you name it, all the religions that are there, Christianity becomes the remnant among all of them. The only one that has understood the mission of God in the world. Are we still together? And then you have the eschatological remnant. Now this is, you need to partner this with that. Because you have an eschatological church, the Christian church that lives in the last days. But within it, there is an eschatological remnant. This is what you mean when you call yourself a remnant. You are not the only church. But within the church of the last days, you are the purest version of God's intention. And I use the word purest loosely. Because it is earned. It is not tagged. Okay? It has to do with conduct. Bear in mind, this is very important. There's a reason why historical Israel is not the eschatological remnant. Initially, they were going to be the eschatological remnant. It was their failure to obey that put them at history. This status is never permanent. It is subject to obedience. Whenever God feels that those years assigned here are failing him, he reverts them to somewhere here and he picks another. Seventh-day Adventists ought to be very careful of this arrogance of thinking that you are at the remnant church forever. Jews still think they are the remnant, though they lost it. It is not a birthright. It is always something God gives, subject to obedience. When the mission is not fulfilled, he takes it to somebody else. It doesn't mean you don't go to heaven. It means you just lose the privilege of hosting the message in that particular period. So Adventism cannot call itself the remnant simply by a tag. There is a mission-orientated status that goes with this. You keep up with the mission, you uphold the title. You lose the mission, you forfeit the title. Okay? Now, the church as the Holy Roman Empire exists for a period of over 1,000 years undisturbed until you get to the 900s where suddenly there is a change in the way this process is going. There are those who now begin to rebel from the Holy Roman Catholic Church under the auspices of the Holy Roman Empire. Are we still together? And they begin to think, no, man, this is not what the Bible wanted us to be. Something is not right here. This has lost its direction. This is not where we started. This is not where we were intended to go. In comes what you would call the Reformations, where now people begin to rebel and are trying to come up with ways of upholding what was the original definition of the church. Out of that are born your Methodists. When your Methodists came out, were born Baptists out of them. Out of Baptists came Jehovah's Witnesses and Seventh-day Adventists. Are we still together? And then out of Jehovah's Witnesses came evangelists. And out of the evangelists came Pentecostals. And out of Pentecostals came spiritual illumination movements, which is where we are. Are we still together? But the change that came here is interesting because this is the birth of denominations. This is from the 1400s all the way to the 1800s. Most of the denominations that are here today are from that era. Okay? Here, the definition of the church obviously has changed because here, the church is no longer held theologically or held administratively through the Roman influence, the church is now a denomination, an organization. And here, the introduction of membership comes in. The introduction of membership is as a rejection of heresy. People are afraid of the things they left in the Catholic Church, making their way back to where they are. And so there is now a formulation of a test. How do we know you truly believe in what we believe in? Enter the baptismal vow. It is a way of regulating heresy. Are we still together? It is a way of trying to keep out what we ran away from. Now, if I could, for example, leave denomination. Now we are zooming into Adventism. Because if you've noticed, I started from very large. We keep on. Okay? So, in this era of denominations, we too are born. The Seventh-day Adventist Church, the founders of this church, were coming from different denominations, mainly Methodist, others Baptist, and a few portions here and there from other movements as well, but mainly Methodist and Baptist. The theological positions of the Seventh-day Adventist Church are about 60-65% similar to those of Methodists and Baptists. Are we still together? But we do have some very critical positions where we differ. They may be few in number, but by scale of identity, they are bigger than what one might think unifies us. Are we still together? I've been made an offer before by the Methodist Church to consider moving to them. I must say the package was lucrative. Sometimes when I'm broke, I remember. I remember that package. Some of the things that make the Seventh-day Adventist Church particularly unique is that among all the denominations in this world, while there are many who believe in the second coming, none believe in it the way we do. Our concept of the second coming, our interpretation of Daniel, Ezekiel, Matthew 24, Mark chapter 10, and Revelation, and Hebrews, sets us on a different trajectory of theology than everyone else. Are we still together? While everyone is in agreement about the second coming, they are also in agreement about dying and going to heaven, which leaves them confused. Is he coming to take, or are we going? If we are going, why is he coming? If he is coming, why are we going? So they have not resolved. They have not resolved that yet. We've sort of resolved that. We've been very clear. So when I say second coming, I need you to also include here state of the dead. Do you understand? Because it's all part of the same theological position. Are we still together? Right? Also, the sanctuary theology. It doesn't matter which university in the world you will go to study theology. You could be a Methodist, you could be a Catholic. If your master's or your doctorate will impact the sanctuary, they will find you an Adventist supervisor. We are the only ones who have a sanctuary theology. I can tell you now, at UKZN, at UCT, at Stellenbosch, all of them, we have dealt with them. When they do their masters, I will, with my undergrad, teach a doctoral student the sanctuary theology who is studying at Stellenbosch University. Once your topic says sanctuary, Stellenbosch will tell you, wait, we need to find you an Adventist. Because no one speaks this other than us. We have invested quite a lot in this theological position. Okay? The Sabbath, although we share it with Shembe, we do kind of differ in who we call the Lord of the Sabbath. So we remain with a different position. And here's another one. This is a very interesting one. Because the Seventh-day Adventist Church, among Christians, is the only one that connects spiritual well-being with physical well-being. The only other religion like us is Buddhism. All others don't. Eat what you eat, you know. But Adventists and Buddhists have seen a very proper connection between health and spirituality. In fact, Dr. Ajay Gupta, not our Guptas, Dr. Ajay Gupta, who is the head of the CNN Medical Bureau, conducted research in trying to find out what really creates a long-lasting life. In his conclusion, he did a 2-hour special. Please go to the CNN archives. He did a 2-hour special on Adventist communities around Loma Linda University. What he found is that through the Adventist health message, those guys were scientifically rated as the healthiest, most mentally and emotionally stable society on planet Earth. It wasn't just physical. They were found to have better balances on their emotions. Now go to Twitter and see how South Africans are emotionally. Something is wrong with this nation. Every time I see things that come out of Twitter, I realize this nation needs Jesus. Honestly, I think even the inventors of Twitter have accepted that South Africa has gone rogue. It is the only country they cannot control. I mean, how does Winnie die and then in 5 minutes you give us Mzwakembuli going Winnie the Pooh? The mother of the nation has been dead for 5 minutes. And someone on Twitter has found a way. The Advent message is more necessary in this country than in any other. I assure you. Adventists need to preach harder in SA. Things are not right. Okay? But also very importantly, notice I wrote the health message. That's very important because the Seventh-day Adventist Church does not believe in meat abstinence. The Seventh-day Adventist Church has a position on health. And diet is a component of it. I need you to stop misrepresenting the Advent health message. It speaks to mental well-being. It speaks to spiritual well-being. It speaks to dietary control. Eating well but thinking wicked is not part of the health message. Are we still together? There's no point in pumping veggies only to give fuel to a dirty mind. Okay? I've met obese vegans. Oh, I have. It's just in our church we don't do sermons with names. Ugubi says yoni bengizonibiza amakama. So there needs to be an understanding that we have a health message which pushes all of us to be healthy. Try whatever you may, however busy your day is. I've considered some kinds of gymming that I'm not going to get there. But I'm a walker, thanks to poverty. I studied in a school very far from home. And since then, all I know is to walk. I may not jog, but if you call me for a walk, I can do 20 Ks with you with ease. All right? Because poverty just gave me that 2 series. So in high school, that's what I did. In primary school, that's what I did. Lastly, justification by faith. That's one of the things that make us very unique. Please bear with me. We are trying to deal with the history of the church here so that we understand where we fit when we get baptized and where we fit when we are becoming its members. What are these things and what are they trying to address for us? Here's another beautiful picture. In the 1950s, the picture of the church changed. Churches began to be constructed this way. They were big, they were nice, and perhaps different to the history of them initially. They now became one-day event places. In the 1950s, they cropped a new disease, where church is where you go to hear a good sermon and then you go home and live your life. What we had abandoned is that church is a lifestyle. Christians prior to the 1950s were preoccupied with doing good for everyone. After the 1950s, people took an executive position to the church. We pay the pastor. We return tithe. he better give us a good sermon. So we reverted to a theological obesity kind of church, where we come, we listen to great music, we listen to a great sermon. If we don't like the sermon, we criticize it, but we go home and do absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing for Christ, nothing for the neighbor, nothing for the friend. And of course, it wasn't coming alone. The 1950s were bringing with them socio-economic changes as well, isn't it? We started to experience gated communities. We started to experience suburbs. We started to experience, please don't call me, I'll call you kind of setting. And so even to help the neighbor became a bit difficult because the neighbor was now walled. Okay? There are some traditions that are in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Pay attention. These are traditions. What does that mean? It means the Seventh-day Adventist Church has never voted it as a belief, yet you talk about it as if it's our belief. The Seventh-day Adventist Church has never said, don't eat meat, yet you speak about it that way. We have only cautioned that meat brings a lot of diseases. We have never developed a doctrine on meat. The Seventh-day Adventist Church does not believe 666 is the papacy. Prominent church writers said this. You all are blank. Like, what? The reason you are like that is because you don't understand how your church functions. In the Seventh-day Adventist Church, it's not what you say that we believe in, it's what we vote at session. The world church combined. We've never said this. We have never, not a single session where we introduce this as an official teaching. Now, I'm not saying we are wrong to say it. I am saying it is not the official position of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. That is why when you go to our Biblical Research Institute held in the General Conference, you have prominent theologians who disagree with this, whose papers are hosted by the General Conference. Because we have never said that as a position of the church. We have said it as an understanding, not as a position. Do you understand the difference between a position and a common teaching? And please listen, don't walk out of here and misquote me. I did not say we are wrong. I merely stated the legality and officiality of this. Here's another one. Adventists don't wear jewelry. And ladies don't wear pants in church. Again, we have never voted this. Okay? But it is a common regional practice in Africa. Okay? Here, I could introduce other things. You don't preach in the Seventh-day Adventist Church unless you're wearing a shirt and a tie and a coat, isn't it? Yes. It's regional. You know, I know it's regional. Besides the research I read, it happened to me and Pastor Blosse. We were invited for camp meeting at Seychelles. Like good Seventh-day Adventists, we packed our suits and we went to Seychelles. When the plane landed on the runway next to the ocean and the doors were opened, there was a heat wave that could exorcise a demon out of you. We went to the hotel, eager to uphold the true values of Adventism. We took off our clothes, we put on our suits, getting ready to go to church. While putting on the shirt, we were already dripping with sweat. The union president came, a Frenchman who's speaking broken English, and he says to us, Pashtash, what is this? And we said, no, he says, he's Cameroonian. He says, my pastor, here, Seychelles, you die. You die. We said, so how do we preach? He says, pants, shirt, yeah, pants, shirt, fine. We went to church feeling nude. Do you understand? We got to church, people were wearing shorts and vests. I looked at Blose and I said, brother, something about our understanding of the church clearly was not on point. And I thank God, in my ministry I've traveled many countries and I've come to realize, it's not Adventism, it's South African. Oh, it's not Adventism, it's African. Okay. Now I'm not saying I don't know what's your standard here in Sentin. Cook your own pot, but you know. Okay. Now, why have I shared all of this? Because ultimately where I want to take you to, some of the traditions that we have, which they are more for the world rather than for us, and we should be very proud of them. For example, the Seventh-day Adventist Church has the second biggest privatized education system, only second to Catholics. We are bigger than Curo and all of those things. Currently, the Seventh-day Adventist Church education system hosts 3.6 million students worldwide, which is not a small thing. It's quite a massive system. Secondly, we have the second largest privatized healthcare system in the world. Literally meaning we are also bigger than healthcare, we are bigger than Mediclinic. We have more hospitals, more clinics, more doctors in our service than Medicare, Netcare, and all of those groups are combined. The only people again who beat us are Catholics. Are we still together? And of course, above all of us are governments. Governments have it even bigger. But that's why it says in the privatized space, Catholics and then us. And actually, Catholics are downscaling. I'm not sure if you are aware, about 6 years ago, the Catholic Church approached the Seventh-day Adventist Church, asking us to take over some of their hospital networks. Yes, you may call them 666, but we actually do partner with them in certain things, positive things. They came to us, they said, look, we are cutting down on our hospital system. Could you take over some of our hospitals? And I think those negotiations are still at hand. Adventist universities still rank among some of the best in the world, including the academics that are there, all right? And again, some traditions that we have already touched on. You cannot preach without a suit and a tie. We think that all over the world, church order is Sabbath school, lesson announcements, divine service, afternoon program, and then Vesper. All right? We also have a belief that we hold strongly and recommended by the church manual that non-baptized members do not preach. And that is what we hold on to, except actually that we don't actually practice this as much as we think we do. The General Conference itself has, for a number of occasions, invited non-Adventists to be main speakers. Just recently, in 2015, we had T.D. Jakes as the guest speaker of the General Conference. Okay? What we do is we vet, like the CIA. He was briefed, we don't do tongues, but don't venture there. Whatever your sermon is going to say, don't go there. Okay? You type your sermon, you give it to us word for word, we'll vet it, we'll okay it, then you can. All right? And by the way, sometimes you need to, I'm not saying do it, but I'm saying sometimes you need to experience this. One of the best sermons I've ever heard in my life was preached by a Lutheran priest. Yashumayela leyansizwa. Yashumayela ngazibona kukhona abantu esabathena ngani ngabaxosha. Ngiqashe yena. Hey yashumayela leya outi yathi yofika egcinene ngathi Thixo kwabantu abadla ibudget yalo muntu. The challenge then comes to where you are today. The church, once again, is evolving. The question you have asked me to address on baptism in the church is coming only as a product of generational changes. So what the church has for many years been ignorant to is that changes in generations also affect the definition of the church and the way it upholds itself. We are in that space now. There is generational progression that has come into the space. We inherited this church from people who never asked why, who did as they were told, okay? And it was very clear. But what has come is a generation of individuals that now ask why. I am a theologian in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, but I'm also now doing studies in a completely secular degree. It's got no reason with living Christianity. I acknowledge the constituency I am leading is just too educated to be led with theology alone. Pastors need more equipping these days than ever before. Whereas in the past we could say, hey, and you would be frightened. Now we say, hey, and you say, infundis. So, generational changes have come. Technology has come. Regrettably, I can no longer repeat my sermons. As I see them on Facebook. Literally 3 minutes after I did the closing prayer, someone sends me a video. I'm like, oh snap. That sermon, hey. Please guys, man, it takes a whole lot of work to produce a brand new sermon. And a sermon should have a life cycle of at least 2 months. But technology has brought that completely to an end. Okay? While preaching, someone is using their phone. They are doing Facebook Live. When you say amen, they press stop. Facebook loads it. It's gone. You have to start from scratch. Okay? There are also cross-cultural interfaces that are affecting the church that were not there for our parents. For example, we now go to church with whites, Indians, coloreds, isn't it? But not only that, there are Zimbabweans, South Africans, Zambians, Kenyans, Venezuelans. In our churches, we are cross-cultural. We are beginning to deal with issues about definition of church that need to accommodate everyone. 15 years ago, where we come from, Noltando, KZN, we knew what church was. Church was Zulu. Zulu was church. There was no one confused about what the church is. AmaZulu, AmaSabata. AmaSabata, AmaZulu. Askwazi okunye. Now, what has happened is in the same building, colors have moved in. Whites have moved in. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? And what that has meant is the definition of church again needs to be shifted. Because from where she comes from, that's not church. Am I making sense? Right. So, I remember we were at Umbilo, Seventh-day Adventist Church, many years ago. We were holding a conference, Pathfinder training, for directors in churches. And at 12 o'clock, while Pastor Paul Charles, who was then the youth director for the KNFC, was still preaching, the white deacons of Umbilo SDA stood up and began to pull down the windows and close them while he was preaching. The white ladies and gentlemen stood up, put their bags here, and made their way out. And the whole black house stayed there listening to the sermon. And I thought to myself, what on earth is going on here? Their definition of church says at 12, the Spirit takes the report back to heaven. After 12, the Spirit is no longer recording, my brother. Files have been closed. Are we still together? When I got to Elderbeck College, that's when I understood it, as I began to experience the white churches there. At 1 o'clock, they're at the beach. At the beach at 1 o'clock. No one is yelling at them. No one is, repent. No. They're dealing with the waves and their redemption. Why have I taken you through this? Because your question is strongly centered here. And you are not the first ones to ask it. Already in the 2015 General Conference session, there was a proposal to discuss the relationship between baptism and the church. But the proposal was rejected at the time. Because there is a strong sentiment coming in certain quarters of the world that what it means to be a Seventh-day Adventist and what it means to be a Christian should be separated. I should be able to be baptized but not be a member of this church. Are we still together? There are some whispers coming of that nature. No, baptize me. Let me go. Are we still together? And both sides, of course, the second side says, no. Baptism is not just entry into Christ. Baptism is entry into the body of Christ. You are an organ in the body. You are not a body. The Bible is very clear. You are all organs in the body of who? Play your role. So we can't baptize an organ and it becomes a body. An organ is not a body. It must belong to the body. Otherwise, it dies on the outside. One brought a good illustration and said, when you are making fire through coal, that fire is sustainable when the coal chunks are together. Pull one out and put it there, its fire dies. The church is a necessary instrument of the workings of God in sustaining the spirituality of believers. That's the one argument. The other argument says, no, Christ himself would convert people and urge them, leave me. Walk away. You are of no benefit to me here. And so the church cannot grow by immersing people into one system. It cannot host every gift of God. Some gifts, as Christ released them, must also be released to spread the gospel through other means and other ways out there. Suddenly you realize they are both biblically correct. They seem to be making fair biblical arguments. And that is why I said to you, I cannot propose to resolve this today. I need time with you to deal with these issues so that in the end, perhaps it is not what we say, but the choice you then make for yourself. Are still together? Now, let me raise these issues as my wrap-up and also suggestion at the same time. We then need to first then begin to once again ask ourselves, what is the church? And if we can answer ourselves, then we must ask, is that definition relevant for today? Taking into consideration the mission God has given us, are we as a church able to deliver on that mandate in our current status and shape? If we can say yes, we can do this, we have answered the question in a particular way. On Tuesday, the former president, Khethelo Mazibuko, was on SAFM, being interviewed about his knowledge of Winnie, the relationship they had, who she was, and also John Nene, the ambassador who passed away, how he had relations with them. Then the journalist inserted a question there and said, while I have you on air, let me steal this opportunity and ask you, do you think the ANC is still relevant? Khalema replies, it is not so much that the ANC is still relevant or not. The ANC will always be relevant. The question is its shape designed for governance? Is it not time to accept that this shape was for liberation? A new shape is required for governance. And that may mean the death of the old shape together with its building blocks and the rebirth. Same ANC, but with a shape that can now propel the country forward. And I thought about that because it was in the midst of me thinking about this question which you had given me. I thought to myself, could this topic actually be asking, here we are as young people in Sandton, South Africa, trying to do church. And we are beginning to notice some cracks in the package we have. And so the question is not whether membership and baptism should go together, but whether the format under which they are hosted right now is beginning to make them incompatible. Because biblically, baptism and the church will always go together. There is no theological issue there. The issue is the methodology of operation that we now need to begin to introspect. the hierarchy of the church, the decision-making processes of the church, the programming structure of the church, does it help to further grow the membership and to further sustain the beliefs by which we enter through baptism? And maybe that is the richer discourse to have. The analysis of the status of the church in relevance to the mission it has today going forward. Now, what I have said is not an easy thing. Not an easy thing at all. Because listening to me from the perspective of someone, two perspectives. One, the older generation, it sounds apostatic. Simply because this is the only church I've ever known in this shape. What are these young people trying to bring now? But even if you are young, if your background is in something less qualitative than Adventism, what you found for you was the epitome. Whereas for those who were born here, what they've found is overdue for change. Do you see the difference in approach? If you are coming from a system where sermons were never researched, pastors were just waffling in the air, there were no processes of making decisions and voting, then you accept Jesus at university. To you, this is it. This is the summit of Mount Everest. But when you were born at the summit, And so you understand when I say to you, it is not something I can resolve today. It is not something you can resolve today. This is the beginning of an international discussion about whether the church needs to change its format. Why did I start where I started? Because it is the beliefs of the church that should never be tampered with, whatever happens. So we now need to perhaps revert to the wisdom of Paul and ask, wait a minute, what truly builds the church? What makes the church exist in SA, in the US, in China, in Seychelles, at different time zones, different clothing patterns, different singing styles, yet this is God's church? And maybe we need to find that thing and preserve it. And then say, having preserved this, where do we go from here? So that the church in 200 years from now, subject to Jesus not coming, God forbid, we will have a church still fulfilling its mission. I dare not to even claim to suggest I have the answers. As a minister in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, I myself am wrestling with these issues. I've not been around since the 1960s or 70s. I've been a pastor in this church for 7 years. And what I have seen in these 7 years has been a drastic change. Never mind other generations. In my generation, what has happened from 2009 when I left college, coming into the TOC, and up to now, I ask every day, who is the church? Who is the church? Because just when I think I have defined who the church is, the conference will give me a new group of churches and I'll go there to pastor there. And what I find there, I'm thinking, who's the church? Please have this discussion. Begin to break it down in its pieces and components. What I can assure you, as I showed you there, the church in the end will be the church triumphant. What we do not know is the shape it will have taken and the changes it will have taken by the time it gets to the end. But the church will get to the finish line. I don't have all the answers. I leave it to all of us to own up to this discussion. Where is the church going and who is the church right now? God bless you.